really enjoy my yard. It's very slow at it. I do something and I'll step back. It'll do something else. Yeah, oh, your favorite organization.
Internet.
Like this. And then internet down there.
Trippy.
That's it. I think you can use no, I'll make it go. I'm surprised.
A common name, kind of for me too. Exactly. So then the real thing is to make sure that the battery holds out.
That's what I've got the battery.
Right, and then that the stream or whatever stays consistent, like
Right.
your connection on your phone.
Right.
As long as your service is fine, right?
Yep. Yep. I think we can stream on 3G, but mine's like lower the frame rate.
Yeah.
Hey, you look familiar.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
What's your name again?
Chris Lehman. Yeah. Interesting setup you got there.
Yeah, it's just a Samsung Galaxy with a Ustream. And then a little Sennheiser boom shotgun and a battery pack. So you don't run out of cell phone battery.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, good to see you.
So that would be the other question is how sensitive is the device? Is it going to pick them up?
Yes. Yeah, it's not going to pick us up. It's a very direct support.
Good morning. While you're still eating, I'd like to just begin the City Club portion of the meeting before our program starts. My name is Cindy Condon, and I'm the president of City Club, and I'm happy to welcome you to City Club's 48th program year. So thank you all for coming. And I just wanted to remind everyone what City Club's mission is all about, and this is my paraphrasing it. We are a forum for civil debate and discussion of local, regional, state, national, and global issues and ideas relevant to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So please keep that in mind, especially the word civil. So, just a brief announcement. I'm happy to announce, as you've seen, we all have new name tags. So they're not all bendy and stuff, but they do have magnets on them. And for anyone with a pacemaker, there is a warning on the back. And those can be exchanged for a name tag with a clip on it. So they've got them at the back table. Moving on, City Club doesn't happen without a lot of work from volunteers. And this is our first meeting of the program year, and it didn't magically happen. Beginning on Monday. There have been people working all summer, and I'd like to introduce your City Club board, for those of you that weren't at the annual meeting in May. So So if the board members could please stand. John Adams, who's chair of the program committee. Perfect, stay standing, John. Barb Berry, not sure she's here. Lloyd Chapman, who is our treasurer, we'll refer to him a little bit later, and he's at the entry. Ed Lesage, busy program member as well. Bob Martin, Alan Pollock, membership committee chair. Evan Remington, Steve Sansoni, Russ Beaton as past president, and moi. So thank you all for your service. And the yeoman's work getting prepared for today's meeting is the program committee. And there are a lot of fabulous programs scheduled for this year. And as most of you know, we meet about every other Friday. And our first five are devoted to elections. But after that, there are a variety of issues, and the program committee meets very often, and the subcommittees meet even more often. So if members of the program committee can please stand, they certainly deserve a round of applause. So. And since May, many of you know we had a membership drive last year and added about 50 new members, I think, 40 to 50 new members. And I just wanted to introduce some new members who have joined since May. So if the new members are here, please stand up. Susan Carey, Mary Graney, Michael Graney, Jana Hofer, and John. Actually, and John stepped up like lickety-split and became a member of the program committee. So there are fabulous opportunities for people who want a membership to get busy right away. James Cohn, Archibald Mills, Mildred Millis, and Mildred Millis. And they're an example of Jan and Les Margosian's and Dick, my husband, and our effort to get all people on Kingwood Drive in West Salem, Salem City Club members. So Pat Strong and Ray Strong, I hope that's right. April Waters and Joyce Zook, who said, I'm not really a new member, I'm a renewing member. I'm a renewing old member. So thank you all for joining. It makes City Club work better. And speaking of new members in last year's membership drive, we've got a new membership drive going on, and Alan Pollock will be up later today, this morning, or by then it will be this afternoon, for a drawing. But the new membership contest is each week a winner will be selected from members who have brought a new guest. We want members to be really engaged in bringing guests to City Club and hopefully promoting membership. The winner of the drawing will receive a gift card, and the gift card today is from Cafe Yelp. Okay, there we go. And the more guests you bring, the more chances you have to win. If your guest becomes a member, you receive an extra entry into the drawing. If you brought a guest and you were not entered in the raffle, you can do so now. So Alan will give you an entry form. Moving on to the real business side and administrative side of City Club. The club is a membership-driven organization, and that's certainly volunteer work, but it's also financial. And we depend on the dues of our members, and sponsorships, and partnerships. And your finance committee, headed by Lloyd, has done a lot of work with the finances, and we are committed to a financially sustainable and stable organization. And so, this probably is not a surprise to many of you, but there will be a dues increase on January 1st. And it will be $90 for an individual member and $150 for two memberships, family membership including two. And so, if you want to beat that increase, join now and join often. So, and beginning October 1st, there will be an increase in the guest admission fees. So they will go up from $5 to $7 a program. And the meal prices will increase to $13. So we're trying to keep any increases manageable, but in order to be sustainable and stable, quite frankly, we need to raise revenue. So for any of you that want to round up your membership dues from 80 to 100 or 90 to 100, that would be greatly appreciated. So, or any extra contribution you can make would be great. Our next meeting is September 26th. And it's, the title of it is Game Changer for Oregon Elections, ? It's on ballot measure 90 and the open primary or two-tier system. So that promises to be a good one as well. And before I introduce Bill Mainwaring, the moderator today, I just want to remind everyone that questions today are a privilege of City Club membership. So members will be invited to ask questions first, and if there is time available, questioning will be open to non-members. Please be considerate when you ask your questions, consider at the time, and state your question. We care about your opinions, but we've come to hear our speakers. So let's give them a chance to respond to as many questions as possible. Please don't ramble in your questioning or state your opinions. We have great speakers today, so let's hear from them. So, without further ado, let's get started. Thank you for coming again, and I'd like, actually, before I do that, I want to welcome our CCTV audience. So our programs are carried on CCTV, so if you missed that, or they are being recorded, and we're going to have them on our website later, and they will be broadcast on CCTV and KMUZ radio. So if you want those scheduled, I think we have representatives in the back of the room, and you can ask them what the schedule is. So thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce Bill Mainwaring, who is our moderator today, and enjoy the show.
Well, ready or not, Oregon voters, here comes another general election. I suspect some of you have noted subtle clues on your home television set that might be occurring, and we've noticed that also at City Club. As a result, we have planned 8 programs focused on the election. Welcome today to the first of 4 of our Friday noon pre-election sessions, mostly debates, but one forum. In addition to that, we are co-sponsoring with League of Women Voters 3 evening candidate forums for candidates, local candidates for the Oregon House, the Oregon Senate, and the Marion and Polk County Boards of Commissioners. And then on November 7th, we'll have a kind of a cleanup hour in which Ed Dover of Western Oregon University will come back for what must be about his 5th encore to summarize the results of the election, not only locally, but statewide and national as well. So we hope you'll be with us for every one of them. Before we get into today's featured attraction, I'd like to plug those next 3 Friday noon programs briefly. 2 weeks from today, on the 26th, we'll have a debate on ballot measure 90. That's the measure that proposes an open or top 2 primary for the state to replace our present primary system. We'll follow on October 10th with a forum. Congressman Kurt Schrader and 3 challengers will be here to discuss issues dealing with the 5th Congressional District. And then on October 24th, we'll have a debate on the measure dealing with driver cards for those who can't prove legal residence. You'll find the details, I think, on printed cards there at your table, and we hope you'll join us for most, if not all, of these. Today, of course, we're going to be treated to a debate of Measure 91, which would legalize recreational marijuana for Oregonians aged 21 and up, beginning in 2016. Any adult would be allowed to possess up to 8 ounces of marijuana and could grow up to 4 plants. It could not be used in public places or by juveniles. The State Liquor Control Commission would regulate its marketing, and there would be a $35 per ounce tax on most marijuana products. As most of you know, the EFLA 91 committee asked Monday to withdraw their previously designated speaker and substitute Congressman Earl Blumenauer. It may be the first time we've ever had a congressman here to debate a ballot measure. But in any event, it represented a change in the original agreement, so we talked to his opponent over here, who very graciously assented to it. And so we've got 2 very able debaters, and we're looking forward to a terrific debate. We'll be using our standard format today. It's kind of tough on speakers, but I think all of us enjoy it. There are a lot of very restrictive time limits, and I think you've both been briefed on that. For opening statements, you'll be allowed 7 minutes, and Bob Zeigan down here will be timing everything you do and flashing warnings when your time's almost up. After the opening statements, we'll have 2 questions from the chair, and the speakers will have up to 2 minutes each to respond to those. Then they'll have a chance to pose a question to each other. That often is the highlight of the debate, of course. And finally, the formal part of the debate will close with their closing remarks for up to 2 minutes each. Then we'll open it up to audience questions, and as Cindy said, giving preference to City Club members will be first in line for those, and we want brief questions, not speeches. So without any further preliminaries, let's introduce the speakers, and the introductions will be very brief, and we'll not do either one of them justice. But the first speaker, representing the advocates for the measure, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, has represented Oregon's 3rd Congressional District in the Portland area for the past 17 years. He served in the Oregon House back in the 1970s. Subsequent to that, he was a member of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners and the Portland City Council prior to his election to Congress in 1997. He's been a leading voice for several years in efforts to legalize marijuana. Joshua Marquis has been District Attorney of Clatsop County at Astoria since 1994. He's been a longtime leader of the District Attorneys of Oregon, especially active in opposition to the legalization of recreational marijuana. The press quotes him frequently on this subject, and he comes with recommendations of a number of law enforcement folks. So with that, Mr. Blumenauer, why don't you select yours?
Thank you very much, Bill. It's really a pleasure to be here today. Actually, I've had this wave of nostalgia as I come in, because I've spent actually more time in Salem because of my legislative service and other activities than any other city other than my hometown, Portland, or now Washington, D.C. Is it really 17 years? That's scary. And it's also a wave of nostalgia because of the subject that we're talking about here today. 41 years ago, down the street, I was part of a debate in the Oregon legislature that was led by self-described conservative hog farmer from Eastern Oregon, the incomparable Stafford Hansel. It was still the most compelling case I've heard, as this teetotaling non-smoker explained the facts, how marijuana was less addictive and damaging than tobacco and alcohol use, which were perfectly legal. What Stafford said then has subsequently been confirmed. The Institute of Medicine did a study. 32% of tobacco users develop dependence. 23% of heroin users. 17% of cocaine users. 15% of alcohol drinkers become dependent. Only 9% of marijuana. That's why Stafford made this brilliant speech. And I was told that if the 19 of us who voted for it had been joined by the people who voted against it but smoked dope, it would have passed. Stafford's presentation resonated for me in all seriousness. My father's life was damaged by the alcohol he drank, causing problems for him and his family. And the cigarettes that he was addicted to killed him. After being out of my life for a number of years, he came back with late-stage cancer. And I watched him die in my living room, smoking until almost he could no longer draw a breath. I've become even more committed as a consequence of our failed policy of marijuana. The prohibition doesn't work, and the consequences more and more clear. It's an expensive failure. To arrest, cite, fine, jail, cost huge sums of money, upwards of $8 to $9 billion nationally at all levels, money that you pay, to say nothing of the lives that are wrecked, especially for young people of color, African Americans, who are nationally about 4 times more likely to be arrested than white young men, even though they smoke at the same rate. And frankly, for these vulnerable young men, even an arrest or a fine that they cannot afford can start them down a path of failure and frustration, which too often leads to a real life of crime. Illegal marijuana markets funds big enterprises, drug cartels, gangs, who are ruining our forests and public lands while they pollute our neighborhoods, our parks, schoolyards, and public spaces selling drugs. It's failing our children. No one thinks it's harder for a 13-year-old girl to buy a joint than a 6-pack of beer. No drug dealer checks for identification. No drug dealer has a license to lose. And in fact, that drug dealer would probably want to sell her a new pill or some powder that will enrich his business. We're breeding disrespect for the law. It's not healthy for the millions who break the law every day, every month, for a law we have neither the will nor the means to enforce. It undermines the credibility of our anti-drug efforts. I've had experts sit before me in congressional hearings and be unable to answer a simple question. How many people died of a marijuana overdose last year? Spoiler alert, 0. Is it true that methamphetamines are more dangerous, are less dangerous than marijuana? They can't give a straight answer. It doesn't have to be this way. We should legalize marijuana, regulate it, and tax it. I strongly urge all of you here, after you're here, the back and forth, and you'll see some ads, read the measure. It will answer many of your questions and dismiss many of the false claims that people who are crusading against it claim. Instead of wasting your tax dollars on a failed policy of prohibition, we can generate millions of dollars a year to help improve our state. 40% of the revenues are dedicated to education. 35% for law enforcement, who can concentrate on real problems. And 25% for drug treatment, prevention, and mental health, which is a real problem and grossly underfunded. Now, the estimates I've seen, the lowest is $16 million a year for the first year. But whatever, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, the fact is there will be very substantial savings because we're no longer citing, arresting, and jailing. And there are other aspects. Consider hemp cultivation. You can get hemp products in any city in Oregon. They're sustainable. Lots of us like them. It's just that it's now not possible for Oregon farmers and ranchers to grow it. We've got an opportunity for serious consumer protections in packaging. Right now, there are thousands of people that get marijuana products legally in Oregon. They have no idea what they're getting, to say nothing of the thousands that buy it illegally. We've got an opportunity here to make a difference. Let me be clear. I don't want to promote marijuana. Unlike many of the people I've debated over the years, I've never used it. I don't want my grandchildren to be part of the 30,000 12 to 17-year-olds who use it in the last month. That's why I support Measure 91. To legalize, tax, and regulate. Don't force 1/3 of a million Oregonians who use almost 1/3 of a million to become criminals. And let's concentrate on getting it out of the hands of kids and be able to put that money to more productive use. I really look forward to our conversation today. Thank you for allowing me to be with you.
Thank you. It's great to be back here. I was here 2 years ago talking about the last legalization measure. And I like Congressman Blumenauer, urge you to read it. It's a pretty dizzying mix of things. And let me make a couple differences between myself and Congressman Blumenauer, although we've actually known each other and have some common friends as people involved in politics. I have used marijuana. It's been a long time, about 40 years. I did inhale. And when I was at the University of Oregon in the early 1970s, it sold for about a lid. Most of you over 60 or 55 would know what that is. That was about an ounce. It sold for about $10 to $15 an ounce. And the decriminalization of marijuana in this state, with all due respect, the legislature didn't start in Salem. It started in Eugene, Oregon, with the guy I was working for at the time, Pat Fortman, a tough on crime, tough as nails DA. It was one of those Nixon goes to China moments. And what he said, back then the law was if somebody was caught with a single joint of marijuana, and at the time the THC level was about 2%. To give you an idea, it now runs anywhere from 20 to 80%. And frankly, since I smoked it, I can tell you have to smoke most of a joint to get high. And marijuana sold for $10 an ounce. Now it sells for $200 to $600 an ounce. And Oregon's concept was it's ridiculous to make felons. People weren't going to prison in Oregon. Now they may in other states. But they still were becoming felons, which might mean they could become doctors, lawyers, morticians, whatever. And he said, this is ridiculous. And he led the move. And Oregon was the first state to do it. I believe the legislature passed it in 1973. It never would have happened but for law enforcement stepping up. Who has supported the decriminalization of marijuana for 40 years? Oregon's district attorneys. There was a move in 1997 to recriminalize it as the marijuana became more and more potent, and we said no. So one of the biggest misrepresentations you're hearing from, to be blunt, Congressman Blumenauer on the other side is, it's a crime. We are criminalizing it. Well, there's arrests and citations. The Oregonian called this claim false in PolitiFact 3 weeks ago. Here's the point. The point is in Oregon, there are about 12,000 marijuana-related incidents in with the police a year. Over 10,000 of those are citations. Anybody here ever get a parking ticket or a speeding ticket? Raise your hand. Okay, you got a speeding ticket, you didn't go to jail, you didn't get a free ride in a police car, you didn't have a criminal record. That's what less than an ounce of marijuana is in Oregon and has been for 40 years. So you can't just glibly say arrests and citations. And Congressman Blumenauer passionately believes, and there are parts of this country where disenfranchisement, where a felony record can haunt you the rest of your life. Let me tell you the facts about disenfranchisement in Oregon. In Florida, 17% of the population is African American, yet 25% of African Americans are disenfranchised because of a felony. That's really alarming. In Oregon, we're a much less diverse state. To be blunt, look at the audience. There's not very many people of color here. The population, African American population, is 3%. You know what the disenfranchisement rate in Oregon is? 2.5. It's actually lower than the overall representation of African Americans. So let me just try something here. There's 14,600 people in prison in Oregon. Sir, I'm going to pick on you right there with the blue blazer. You've heard about the war on drugs. How many people do you think are in prison out of that 14,600 for marijuana? Just give me a guess.
Yes, I'd say 1,000.
1,000, yeah. Actually, there's just over 1,000 people in Oregon's prisons for all drug offenses, mostly selling heroin. Oregon has the second lowest imprisonment rate of the United States for drugs. I think only Vermont is lower. The number of people in prison for marijuana in Oregon is less than 100. The fact of the matter is that I doubt if we spend $2 million a year in the state of Oregon enforcing marijuana laws. And I'd ask you to look carefully at this because A, it allows the OLCC under the jurisdiction of Cover Oregon. You know, how did that work out? I mean, excuse me, I got ahead of myself. The Oregon Health Authority, the people that brought you Cover Oregon. Now, I'm from the government, but when someone says, I'm from the government, trust me, we'll work it out, I just ask you to look at Cover Oregon. I mean, that did not work out well. If you look at the measure, you'll notice that there really are no regulations. There's nothing that says you, I was in Denver recently, there are 600 retail marijuana stores in Denver. The only difference between medical marijuana, which by the way would coexist with this, there's 65,000 medical marijuana card holders, and under Oregon law, they may possess 1.5 pounds at any one time. And God forbid they should get down to just a pound, which is about $4,000, where they can restock that other 0.5 pound. Now, I think you could probably stay completely gorked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for about 6 months on £1.5 pound of marijuana. I don't doubt that marijuana has some legitimate uses. 10 years ago, I wrote an op-ed in the Oregonian urging marijuana to be descheduled so that doctors could prescribe it, because it clearly does have some medical use. On the other hand, the proponents of this measure would not just have you believe that marijuana isn't dangerous, that it's beneficial. So under this, I say I only have a minute left. Two quick points. One, why is it not okay for Monica Weeby to bring millions of dollars of dark money in from the Koch brothers? I think most of us are offended by that. But yet millions of out-of-state dollars are what's funding Measure 90. And the other thing is, look carefully at this measure, because it not only allows you to have ½ pound of marijuana if you're an adult, you can also have a pound of edibles, you can also have a gallon of marijuana liquid, you can also have an ounce of hashish, and you can grow 4 plants. And as the Oregonian pointed out, growing 4 plants indoor takes up about the same amount of electricity as 29 refrigerators. That's not very economical, and I look forward to, within the confines of the time, to answering more questions and making more points. So thank you.
Thank you both, and now we have a couple of questions here from the chair. The first one will be directed to Mr. Blumenauer first, and then Mr. Marquis, and we'll reverse the order for the second question. What are the pros and cons of the specific limits placed on marijuana by the various states? For example, Oregon would allow possession of 8 ounces, while Washington allows 1 and Colorado 1. Oregon would allow adults to grow 4 plants, while Washington allows 0 except to licensed growers, and Colorado 6 plants. Does any of this matter?
Well, if you believe.
Is it working?
Okay. Well, if you believe Mr. Marquis, we're not really enforcing it anyway, so it doesn't. My feeling is we're in the midst of a process that where Washington and Colorado are moving forward. They're experimenting. So far, the rollout has been relatively smooth. The sky hasn't fallen. We have a different approach here. It's not frozen in the Constitution, so we'll have an opportunity to take further notice of what happens in those 2 states, look at what we do, make adjustments going forward. The bottom line here is that marijuana is widely available now. We just don't know what people have. There's no product safety. There's no tamper-proof packaging. There's no research into what it is. And this will be a step forward to be able to have a regular marijuana market. And I'm absolutely convinced within the course of the next 10 years, this is going to be adopted across the country, not just for the 23 states that have adopted medical marijuana and another 11 that have some aspect of it. But I think we will deschedule it nationally, and states will be able, like they do with alcohol, to make their own rules and regulations. And people from time to time will be able to adjust based on what works and what doesn't. This is uncharted territory now because it's widely available. Any of you could get a joint in a matter of minutes. Now, I frankly didn't take the risk that Mr. Marquis took and hope that he didn't get arrested and then not be able to be an attorney. But you could do it if you wanted. What we want to do is be able to take the Wild West that's funding drug cartels, that's shady elements, and be able to turn it into a legitimate, tax-paying, regulated enterprise, not the Wild West.
Thank you, Mr. Marquis.
Can you hear me? I don't think this is working. I'll just try to speak loud. Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, for one thing, one of the reasons that at age 19 I was so reckless is I had absolutely no fear that the Eugene police were going to bust in my door and get me. And 41 years later, I think people are even less worried about it. The point is that all this business about all lives are going to be ruined, the police are going to break in your door, that it didn't happen in 1975, it didn't happen in 1985, and it's definitely, now maybe it's happening someplace where Congressman Blumenauer is hearing about Florida, but it isn't happening here. Again, people are generally shocked when they find out how people, in my office, I'm a medium-sized office, I filed out of 1,400 cases, 500 felonies, 3 marijuana cases last year, and they all went to prison. So if this thing passes, I ain't gonna get a dime. I'm not gonna lose any staff, I'm not gonna gain any. I don't take campaign contributions from either pharmaceutical companies or from groups that are big marijuana that is gonna become corporate marijuana. The very same people, the Congressman Blumenauer is saying, oh, they're sort of, they're Wild Western cartels. Many of those are the same people that are setting up these stores. And if you think Oregon medical marijuana is closely regulated, you'd be wrong. There's 65,000 card holders in Oregon. I would bet everybody in this room is eligible to have a medical marijuana card. And by the way, that law will continue to exist. So, Mr. Blumenauer says, why does it matter? If it's so available, why do I care about this? Well, I usually debate the death penalty and mandatory sentencing. I have never seen people get so angry about any subject as marijuana. And I hope that marijuana doesn't make people that mean and crazy, because I thought it mellowed people out. But the fact of the matter is that the reason I don't care if adults go and smoke marijuana. I really have no interest. But if you flood the market, if you let everybody grow 4 plants, every adult, if you do all of this else, what's going to happen? You are going to have a huge trickle down to kids. I only care about 2 things. I don't want people driving under the influence, and I don't want children getting it. If you took the price of soda pop and dropped it to 10 cents a bottle, what do you think would happen? More people would get using it.
Time. Okay, the next question will go first to Mr. Marquis. Please try to look ahead 5 or 10 or 20 years. If voters legalize recreational marijuana, what resulting changes would you expect in marijuana consumption? First of all, by adults, secondly, by teenagers.
I would expect that I have a very hard time looking 10 or 20 years ahead. But I would expect within 5 years, we think that you would get a lot more people using it. I mean, it's like any other product. It would be legitimate. Anybody could purchase it who was over 21. It doesn't matter if you're a convicted child molester. You're not disenfranchised from possessing it. It would, just as alcohol, I mean, what are the 2 worst drugs in our society? I would agree with Congressman Blewett. They're alcohol, which is far more toxic than pot, and tobacco, which is far more addictive. Well, what's happened? Oh, we tax it. And how's that worked out for us? We have millions, billions of dollars of healthcare costs associated with tobacco use, and we have billions of costs. I'm a prosecutor. The most dangerous drug I deal with is alcohol. So why on earth would we want, as the director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse says, I don't really care about marijuana, but what's going to happen? You are going to enlarge the markets, enlarge the number of people who have access to it, particularly kids. And there is substantial research that says you don't want kids with developing brains of 15, 16, 17 years old to be regular users of marijuana. Now, are they going to turn into reefer madness fiends because they have a joint? No, they're not. But as Congressman Blumenauer says, this is an experiment. And why, and I'm sorry, but you may live in a different political reality. I go all around the United States speaking to groups not about marijuana, but if you look at a map of the United States, there's this blue strip that goes down Oregon, another blue strip down the East Coast, and a couple blue off, and then there's this sea of red. And if you think in South Carolina or North Dakota or Nebraska, they're about to legalize marijuana, well, I won't say you're smoking something, but I think it's highly unrealistic.
I think what will happen over the course of the next 5 or 10 years is that we will be treating this in a thoughtful and responsible fashion. Now, according to Mr. Marquis, it's widely available, nobody gets prosecuted, so there are no checks and balances now. Although there are, in fact, people in jail and in prison for it. But if you take the assumption that it's just widely available, what's different is in 5 or 10 years, first of all, people will know what they get. You don't know what you get now, even for medical marijuana. Second, We will have more resources to deal with law enforcement and with drug addiction and education. Third, we can stop the hypocrisy pretending that marijuana is some serious, deadly scourge for the country. Mr. Marquis agrees that tobacco and alcohol are worse. They kill more people, they're more addictive. But what's happened? When I was in high school, smoking was widely accepted. For kids, for adults, both my parents, as I mentioned, my father. What's happened over the last 40 years? Well, we didn't lock up people who smoke cigarettes. What we did is we exposed the tobacco industry for the lies that they had. We started to regulate the product, and we taxed the dickens out of it. And that's had a huge difference in terms of youthful smoking, which is at a lower level than any time since we've been keeping track of it. And that's what we can and should do with marijuana. Educate, regulate, and tax it. Focus on the drug dealers and this underground black market. Get the cartels out of it and treat it responsibly, like we've done with tobacco and alcohol.
Thank you both very much. Now you get to go at each other. The rules are you each have 1 minute to pose a question to your opponent. He has 2 minutes to respond, and you have 1 minute to rebut. And so you're first, I think, Mr. Blumenauer. The floor is yours.
I wonder if you'd be kind enough to outline what you and your office have done and are doing to deal with the prescription drug epidemic in New York.
Congressman Blumenauer points out that prescription drug abuse is a huge problem. Actually, many of the vehicular homicides, and in fact, the most recent vehicular homicide my office prosecuted had the presence of oxycodone, also known as marketed as OxyContin. We treat prescription drug abuse in exactly the same way as we do heroin and methamphetamine. My office is actually one of the few in the state that prosecutes people for forging drug prescriptions. I'm informed that in many counties they just give up and don't even bother to do that. So if the question is, there's a very real problem with prescription drug abuse. If we're going to play boogeyman, I would say that OxyContin is a far, far more dangerous drug than marijuana. We're not talking about legalizing OxyContin. We're talking about, in this case, what should we add another drug? Now, there are people who believe that marijuana is not a drug. I mean, heck, if you go into Safeway and you buy aspirin, the aspirin says 325 milligrams. It tells you what the recommended dose is and how much you should take a day. Go to Colorado, which has more restrictive laws than Oregon does. It doesn't tell you how much to take. I don't know if any of you read Maureen Dowd's column where she ate an entire 100 milligram candy bar and ended up having a very bad acid trip at the Four Seasons in Denver. Now, did she die from it? No. But the DA, I'm sorry, it's not rolling out as smoothly as Congressman Blumenauer says. The DA of Denver happens to be a Democrat like me, and it is not working out well at all because of all kinds of complicated things with the federal law, because most of these changes, frankly, have to be made at the federal level. It has to be rescheduled. The Treasury Department has to allow them to bank their money. Or what you're doing is just setting up a bunch of cash businesses that are just screaming, rob me, please, on them. And Salem has not been without its problems in terms of drug rip-offs. And marijuana has gotten so potent and so valuable that in many cases it's worth more than gold on a per ounce basis.
Time out. Thank you.
1 million opioids will be, 100 million will be prescribed this year in Oregon. The misuse, illegal use, and addiction will kill more. Heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines are dwarfed by prescription drug overdose. Yet the marijuana crusaders are largely silent about this epidemic. Have we seen any prescription drug summits lately? Could it be that Big Pharma, instead of funding drug crusades against cheaper, more effective, less damaging, and addictive alternatives because they're afraid of the competition? I think it is hypocritical and tragic to concentrate on focusing on marijuana reform when there are real dangerous drugs that are killing people. I would urge any of you to read the op-ed in the New York Times by Nate Jackson, who talked about how he used marijuana to medicate instead of having pushed on him prescription drugs by the doctors in the NFL.
What Congressman Blumenauer is doing in what's called in magic in politics is misdirection.
This is your new question, I take it?
Well, okay, can I respond?
No.
I thought we were talking about marijuana. I didn't think we were talking about.
Unless you can find a sneaky way of working it into your closing
I
statement.
want to change the format. Give him another minute and I'll take another.
No, let's don't do that.
I didn't have any objection to
I
that.
just didn't want to be a bully.
Okay, here's my question about marijuana, about Measure 91. Why, in all of the ballot titles, one of which you authored, Congressman Blumenauer, it appears, does it say over and over again that over 10,000 Oregonians are arrested? And why, in many of the ballot titles, I realize you didn't author all of them, the very first one talks about adults having their lives ruined. Under our current law, this is the argument, a 20-year-old student who has a small amount of marijuana could be arrested, put in jail, lose their loans. Considering that they can't be arrested, Congressman, they don't go to jail, they don't get a criminal record, why is the Yes on 91 campaign continuing after the Oregonians said it was a lie to claim that we are spending vast amounts of criminal justice resources on going after pot users when it's simply not true?
In the comments I made here, I made clear that I talked about cite and arrest. And I mentioned that even on some of the issues where you get a fine of $500 or $600 and you can't pay for it, that can have a serious consequence. This racial disparity, where young people are more likely to be arrested if they are people of color, strikes home to me. My younger grandson has an African mother. He's more likely to be arrested than his other cousins. There are people who are a court of law there are people who are arrested here for something that would not be illegal under the law. You could be able to transfer or sell. These things are now all illegal and people get caught in this net. And it is true, these things compound. You can, in fact, if you have an arrest or a conviction, you can end up not being able to live if you live in public housing. If you have a criminal record, and some of these people are very vulnerable, and if you haven't met them, we'll be happy to take you to Portland and show you some of the minority community where they are living on the edge. And to subject them to something that has no earthly purpose. Or you just indicated it's not as dangerous as alcohol or tobacco. They can get sideways with the law. The whole process, according to you, is widely available now. Why have the risk of people doing this? Why are there thousands of people who are being cited, if not arrested? And there are people who are arrested, and looking at the records of your Classic County Jail, according to the records, you can see there are people in there for possession of marijuana. Even if it's only 100 in the state penitentiary, they shouldn't be there for something that most people think should not be illegal. This is a gross misuse of resources, and we should change it.
Mr. Marquis, your rebuttal?
Well, Congressman Blumenauer has just completely avoided my question. The reason they're telling you 10,000 people have been arrested is they want to fool you into believing that massive amounts of criminal justice resources are being spent. These people are being handcuffed, taken to jail, prosecuted, losing their ability, having to say, I've been arrested for a crime. Guess what? None of that's true. If any of you have ever gotten a parking ticket or a citation, it was for speeding, it was not comfortable, and you may have had to pay a $250 fine. But it's not a crime. And they say this over and over and over again. And you know what the people are in prison for marijuana? And maybe Congressman Blumenauer thinks this is okay. Those small number of people are in there for selling marijuana to minors. And that's not enough. They have to have a violent criminal history under the sentencing guidelines. This is what I do for a living. And I know whereof I speak when I'm talking about marijuana. And the fact of the matter is, this crisis that Congressman Blumenauer and the yes people want you to believe simply doesn't exist. Unless the answer is legalize all marijuana, including selling it to kids.
Okay. In just a minute, we'll invite them both back for closing remarks. Before I do that, I want to remind you that we're going to have an audience question period, and as soon as they finish. We take questions first from dues-paying members of City Club and from our guests only if there's time. And we do want brief questions, not speeches. With that, for fairly brief speeches, I'll invite our two speakers back to the lectern. Mr. Blumenauer.
This is an opportunity for us to get our priorities straight. We are citing, arresting, and jailing people, thousands in Oregon and around the country every year, for something that a majority of Americans think should be legal. We're wasting your tax dollars on failed prohibition. And most dangerously, we're failing to protect our children from it. 30,000 kids, we're told, used marijuana last month. And they did it being exposed to a black market who are happy to sell them things that might hook them for life or that will kill them. By wasting time on marijuana prohibition, which if you believe Josh really doesn't exist in Oregon, it's just a kind of open market, we're failing our kids and our society. The real problem is heroin, prescription drug, cocaine, and meth, while supporting drug cartels. Look at the growing operation we just found out in Southern Oregon. Every argument you hear against Measure 91, you could have heard 90 years ago against prohibition. You know, more people will drink. More people will become alcoholics. It'll be easier for children to get. There'll be no limits on the amount of alcohol you can have at home. It will lead to drugs and cigarettes. Well, we look past the hysterics and realize prohibition of alcohol was damaging Americans. We let states regulate it as they see fit, and I think society is better as a result. Society will be better off when we eliminate this prohibition. Let's protect our children, stop wasting revenues, stop complicating, if not ruining lives in some cases. As Stafford Hansel argued 41 years ago, let's legalize it, regulate it, and tax it.
Let's talk about Measure 91. We're not talking about prohibition in 1922. We're talking about the state that led the country, led by a prosecutor in a job like mine, in fact, my mentor, 40 years ago. And possessing less than an ounce of marijuana does not cause you to lose your job, does not cause you to go to jail. And Congressman Blumenauer just says, he says, well, it's citations, it's arrests, they're all the same thing. No, it's not. If you sell heroin, we are going to try to put you in prison. If you possess half an ounce of marijuana, about $100 worth, if at all, you're going to get a ticket. Just like if you go 165 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. What the most disturbing thing is the claim that marijuana has absolutely no downside. Now again, I've tried to conceive and be reasonable that it's, again, less toxic than alcohol, less addictive than nicotine. But why, as the head of the National Institute of Drug Abuse says, would we want to introduce yet another drug? And do we really, and what read, I'm sorry, this is called ID 53. There's nothing in here about packaging. There's nothing in here about how many stores. Would you like to have 300 marijuana stores in Salem? Well, guess what? You could, because there's nothing in this that limits it. Also, by the way, there's nothing that prevents a convicted child molester from getting a license under this. The only thing that would prevent you from getting a license is if you have at least one conviction for delivery of drugs in 5 years or 2 within 10. And the main thing that is deeply disturbing about the Yes campaign is they are trying to fool you into believing that incredible amounts of your resources are being spent. If this measure passes, which it might because so many millions of out-of-state dollars are coming in, my office will see absolutely no difference. I don't have any marijuana grants. I don't get bonus points for prosecuting people for marijuana. I have no financial interest in it.